Picture this. Southern Cross Station in Melbourne. A bustling hub. Millions passing through. You'd think no one could just vanish there. But that's what happened in the case of Anan Leo. And it all began with a little girl nicknamed Pumpkin. This deep dive uses an audio case file and, well, we uncover a story of manipulation, deceit, and ultimately tragedy.
It is fascinating how a place for connection, becomes the backdrop for something so heartbreaking. I mean, think about the sheer volume of people in Southern Cross Station. It almost creates this illusion of safety, right?
Right.
A sense of anonymity that someone like Nan Shui, the man who left his daughter there, could use.
It's easy to get lost in a crowd, to think someone else is looking out for those who need help.
Right.
But Pumpkin's case shows how much individual awareness matters.
Yeah.
Thankfully, an elderly Chinese couple saw her alone.
Yeah.
They eluded a Victoria Rail employee.
Crucial their actions were. They saw a child out of place. The employee also noticed some things. Pumpkin, about 3, was dressed in bright clothes, a red denim jacket, pink pants, a patterned vest.
Almost like someone wanted her to be seen.
Exactly. But her hair was greasy. That hinted at neglect.
It's a strange contrast, isn't it? The clothes and then that detail. Initially, police thought she was separated from family. But the CCTV footage, well, it revealed something much worse. It showed a man named Shui leading Pumpkin. He was pulling a suitcase.
Oh, that suitcase.
He takes her to the base of an escalator, and then, without a look back, he just leaves her there.
That suitcase is such a chilling detail.
Right.
It speaks to planning, to premeditation, a plan in motion. What was he thinking as he walked away from his own daughter?
And what about Pumpkin? Standing there watching him disappear. The fear, the confusion, I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Nan Shui. He was 53, a prominent martial arts instructor in the Auckland, New Zealand Chinese community. He had this persona, almost mythical, saying he learned his skills from a mystical figure when he was a kid.
And he even published an autobiography, right? Detailing this whole fantastical origin story.
He was creating a character, a facade.
To impress, to manipulate.
And for a while, it worked. He gained a following, a reputation, authority in the community, but there were cracks in that facade. Investigators found inconsistencies, lies about his qualifications, a history of being ostracized from martial arts circles because of his, attacks on other teachers.
Amazing how easily people are fooled.
It is.
It's that human desire to believe, to
Yeah.
trust those who, seem confident and authoritative.
Right, but there was a much darker picture underneath. And that brings us to Anan Leo, a young woman. She was 23 when she left China for New Zealand, hoping for a new life, a fresh start. Little did she know she was walking into something awful.
It's tragic how dreams are shattered. Anan was lonely, looking for connection. She met Shui when she was looking for a place to stay. Their relationship, became transactional quickly. She needed to stay in New Zealand when her visa expired, and he offered to marry her.
Desperate for belonging,
Yeah.
Shui saw it as a way to gain control over someone.
The power imbalance was huge. The age gap, her reliance on him for residency, his control over her.
And the cracks in his persona started to show in the marriage, too. They seemed united to the outside world, but there were whispers,
Right.
observations from those who knew them that hinted at something else.
One of Shui's students, a film student, was making a documentary about him.
Okay.
The student said there were no family photos in the house.
Mhm.
Instead, there were posters of Shui posing in his martial arts stances. He was trying to erase Anan, replace her with this image, this powerful, dominant image.
Wow. And he even told the student not to speak directly to Anan, insisted on using a translator.
Isolation,
Yeah.
a classic tactic of abusers,
Yeah.
controlling all interaction with the outside world.
Right. And then there's this incident. 2006, the year before Anan disappeared, there's an argument.
Oh.
Money's thrown at Anan. She's holding their baby.
Yeah.
Punches. A knife held to her stomach.
Oh my gosh.
Such an escalation. Shui was losing control. It's hard to believe this respected community leader was capable of such violence. But this was just the beginning, just the tip of the iceberg. It's scary to think about that 2006 incident, the violence, the knife. And she was holding their baby. Who does that? It makes you think, what was going through her mind?
Anan showed incredible strength. She didn't just hide in fear. She took action, reported the assault, went to a women's shelter, even went back to China with Chen Shun to get away from Shui.
Trying to protect herself and her daughter, create some distance.
Right. But Shui wouldn't let her go. He violated that protection order, stalked her. He even broke into the house she was staying at in Wellington.
It's that cycle of abuse, right? Using fear and intimidation to keep control.
Exactly. Even when victims escape, the threat is still there. Like there's no way out.
It's so frustrating. Anan did everything right. She reported it, got help, tried to be safe. But the system meant to protect her, it failed.
Well, the court issued that protection order, but as we saw, that piece of paper doesn't always stop someone. He violated it again and again. And there were barely any consequences. It makes you wonder, how effective are those orders? And what resources are there to enforce them?
And then there's Judge Ricordan. His decision to give Shui a suspended sentence, not jail time, for that assault in 2006. I mean, that sparked a lot of debate about how domestic violence cases were handled in New Zealand.
Oh, absolutely. A major turning point. It brought to light the problems within the family violence court system. Were they really putting victims first? Did the judge understand how serious it was? Was Anan really heard?
It's like legal actions don't always equal safety.
Right.
A suspended sentence looks good on paper, but did it zap Shui?
No, clearly not.
And through all this, we get these glimpses into Anan's thoughts, her hopes and fears. From her blog, remember what she wrote about happiness ending in sorrow, cherishing memories, finding brightness after bad luck. It's heartbreaking to read knowing what happened to her.
It really is. Her voice is so clear. You can feel her wanting love, a happy life, peaceful life.
And it makes the tragedy even worse. But back to Shui in Melbourne. His plan to leave Chen Shun and then to murder Anan. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. He planned it.
Oh, without a doubt. He went back to New Zealand, got his passport, a ceremonial sword, took out a lot of money, bought tickets, first for himself, then for Chen Shun. So calculated, methodical, he was preparing to disappear.
And then 2 days after he left Chen Shun, that horrible discovery, Anan's body in the trunk of his car.
Right.
Awful. Naked, except for gloves, a tie, a yellow tie around her neck, red underwear,
Yeah.
and a jacket next to her.
The autopsy confirmed it. Strangulation, probably with that tie.
It's just, I can't, it's...
And the pendant she wore, it actually made the asphyxiation worse. Another level of cruelty. How can someone who seems so respected be so brutal?
We see now it was all fake, a mask. And what he did in Melbourne, it wasn't sudden. It was the result of years of violence and control, building up and up.
Exactly. Shui ran to the United States, leaving behind so much pain and so many questions.
He used that visa waiver program. You know the one? It lets citizens of some countries enter the U.S. without a visa for a short time.
Right.
Ironic, isn't it?
Yeah.
A system meant for easy travel, used by a fugitive.
It made it harder for the authorities.
Oh, definitely.
They had to work with Interpol, issue a red notice, get a whole task force together, and they were chasing a man who was trying to vanish. He had a head start, probably using every trick he knew to avoid capture.
A race against time. To find him before he was gone, they figured out some of what he did. He stayed at a motel in LA's Chinatown for a bit, then nothing.
Do you think he chose that place on purpose to blend in,
Yeah.
language, the culture? Could he hide in plain sight there?
Maybe. It shows that even now, in this world where everyone's connected, there are still places to disappear. For a while, anyway. But the police didn't give up. His photo was everywhere. The U.S. Marshals, a wanted poster, even America's Most Wanted.
The media, it was so important, kept his face out there, kept the story alive, hoping someone would see him, you know?
And it worked. There were sightings, first in Texas, then in Mississippi. Like he was playing with them, leaving a trail, always one step ahead.
Staying hidden, changing plates, maybe even how he looked. A cat and mouse game. And while this was happening, back in New Zealand, there's another story, adding even more tragedy. Shui's other daughter, Grace.
Oh, right. She was estranged from him. He'd abandoned her years before. It's almost unbelievable, isn't it? The same thing, twice. So cold.
It's a pattern.
Yeah.
It's like he had no emotions, no empathy, hard to understand. And the worst part, Grace found out about Chen Shun from the news, about her father.
Can you imagine finding out you have a sister, and it's because your father did these horrible things?
It's just awful.
But even after all that, Grace was amazing. She started the Little Pumpkin Trust to help Chen Shun. She even thought about adopting her.
Taking a terrible situation and turning it into something good.
And Anan's mother, Xiaoing, she had to come all the way to New Zealand to get her granddaughter. Imagine that grief. But she had to be strong for Chen Shun.
That photo of them at the airport,
Heartbreaking.
the pain on her face, but the strength too, to give Chen Shun a home filled with love. They went back to China with Anan's ashes.
A tiny bit of closure, I guess.
Hmm.
But what about justice? Would Shui face what he did?
And what about the impact on how New Zealand handles domestic violence?
The media, huh? It kept things moving, led to the break in the case.
Public awareness, it really can change things. Sometimes all it takes is the right person seeing the right thing.
Like what happened with Shui. A group in Georgia, they got friendly with him, thought he was just new there, trying to settle in. They had no clue they were with a fugitive.
Crazy how everyday things can lead to something unexpected, just going about their life and then bam, they help bring a killer to justice.
They saw his photo in a Chinese newspaper, and something seemed weird, changing his license plates, avoiding questions about his past.
Little details, right. By themselves, not much. But together, they tell a different story.
They came up with a plan, lured him to an apartment, said it was a party, and, well, they tackled him, tied him up, used his own pants, held him there till the cops came.
Like something out of a movie. It shows how important it is to pay attention. They weren't cops, just people who saw something off and did something.
They got awards for their bravery. And that $10,000 reward for catching Shui, they gave most of it to Chen Shun.
That's something else. Making sure the reward for catching her father benefits her.
Shui was sent back to New Zealand, put on trial for Anan's murder. The jury found him guilty. But even then, he said he didn't do it.
Of course.
Came up with all these stories. Said someone else did it, even blamed it on, get this, rough sex gone wrong.
Typical abuser. Won't take responsibility. Shifting blame, trying to control the story. Even with all that evidence.
But the evidence was strong. Forensics, the history of abuse, him running away, it all pointed to him.
Even the judge said Shui's defense was weak. Talked about the terror Anan felt, strangled with her husband's tie. No air for minutes.
Ugh, it's awful. Shui got life. Possibility of parole after 12 years. But even that sentence, people thought it wasn't enough.
Makes you think about the whole justice system in New Zealand. Does it work for domestic violence cases? Are they doing enough to protect victims? Are the sentences strong enough?
And you have to think about Judge Ricordan and that suspended sentence in 2006. Did that put Anan in more danger?
We'll never know for sure, but it did make people look at the family violence courts, and they changed some laws, trying to make things safer.
So it wasn't just about putting Anan's murderer away. It made things change, made people more aware of domestic violence.
Sad that sometimes progress comes at such a high price. Anan's story lives on, though, in the changes made, in the awareness, in the fight to help victims and hold abusers accountable.
Shui, though, he kept saying he was innocent, even in prison. Wrote a whole book. Called it, I Was Not the Murderer.
He just had to control everything.
But what you do matters more than what you say. And what he did, well, it showed he was guilty. At his first parole hearing in 2020, he finally admitted it. Said he was sorry now. Said he'd become a Christian. Tried to explain away leaving Chen Shen. Said it was to get away from the situation. Hard to believe he really meant it. After all those years of lying, maybe it was just to get out of prison.
Yeah, but the parole board, they saw through it, denied his request. Said he was still dangerous, needed more rehabilitation, a small win for justice.
This has been a tough, deep dive. A story about using people, lies, and a terrible ending.
But it also shows how strong people can be, a community fighting for justice, a system forced to see its flaws.
Anan Leo's story reminds us that we all have a part to play in stopping domestic violence. It's about recognizing the signs, supporting victims, and pushing for change to make our communities safer.
Remembering Anan, honoring her, working for a world where these tragedies don't happen anymore.
If this case got to you and you want to learn more, the full audio file is out there. It's called Case 149-Anan-Lee.mp3.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep asking questions, stay informed, and be involved.